So, Laura, you recently had a legal victory right now as your case forges on, a reprieve from this school policy that has made national headlines, a policy that forced you and other teachers to essentially lie to parents about their children's gender identities. And this is a big case. I think the eyes of the nation are on this case and on California in particular because of what is going on there. But I want to start with where did this policy at the center of all of this, where did it begin? How did you first learn about it? Take us through some of that background.
I think it was in February of 22. We had a training where they presented all of this to just the teachers at my school. And when we saw what they were saying, that we have to exclude parents, both Elizabeth and I were really taken aback. We thought, how can this possibly be? No one's a bigger champion of children than their parents. And we don't want to take the role of parents. We like to partner with parents, but we absolutely understand that parents have the number one responsibility for their children, and they have the right to raise them as they see fit.
Yeah, and so you find out about the policy and you're trying to figure out, how am I going to navigate this? What am I going to do? At what point did you realize, okay, there's a policy on the books that is purportedly telling us we have to lie to parents about their kids, pretend that they might not be transitioning socially when they are, and the school stepping into this? At what point did you realize, okay, I now have to take a stand on this?
I did receive a talking to about misgendering a student, and I didn't I didn't know what to say. And then I clicked in my head, this is leading down the road to discipline. And then hearing another teacher who had been formally disciplined, I was like, well, I'm on the path to losing my job if I don't follow this policy. And I don't agree with this policy. So it kind of puts you in a bad position. I don't want to lose my job. I love my job. I love my students. I want to be there. And it was kind of choose your faith or choose your job. And that's a terrible position to be put in.
That is a terrible position to be put in. How long have you been an educator?
Since 1991. And I've been
So
with
you've been a teacher a long time.
And with Escondido since 1994.
Wow.
So this would be my 20th or my 30th year.
And I'm asking this because my wife's a teacher. I'm around a lot of teachers, and people teach that long because they're passionate about teaching. That's why people do it. It's not an easy job. What for you is the most rewarding part of teaching?
Making connections with the kids. I love them, and it appears that they love me. We just get along. I find something that a kid likes, and then I will discuss that with them, if it's skateboarding or whatever their interest is. And then they buy into you. They want to perform for me. I give lots of rewards for my students. Also, I am the toughest teacher. I have very strict standards, protocols that have to be followed. And I'm a PE teacher. If you look out on the blacktop, there's 4 PE classes. My class is amazing. They're all seated on their numbers, doing the right thing. Other teachers, kids are running around a little bit crazy. And it appears that I have good classroom management because I hold kids accountable. When I say something, I mean it. I follow through. And I think kids need that structure. They need that in their life.
Absolutely.
They need someone to lead them. And I also have very high standards. I'm very hard grader on the mile run, much harder than the other PE teachers. And kids complain about that, but it makes them better.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how it works, right? That's how it works. It makes you better the harder you work. And, so you and Elizabeth, and we've had Elizabeth on to talk about this story as well. You make the decision, you go to court, you challenge this. Now, you were able to secure, and what you're challenging is this policy of, having to lie to parents and the position it puts you in as an educator. You were able to get a preliminary injunction. And I want to go to you, Paul, as an attorney. Help us understand, because this case is ongoing. This doesn't stop the case or settle the case in any way, but this injunction is a victory for the educators. Can you explain to us what it means?
Sure. Yeah, it's actually a very big deal. The way I mean, before you get a preliminary injunction, the court has to determine that you have a likelihood of prevailing on the merits of the case. They don't just give you an injunction. It's a very difficult remedy to obtain. And in making that assessment that you're likely to prevail, the courts are often signaling how they're going to rule at the end of the case. And this was not just some 5-page ruling. This was a 36-page, very well-reasoned ruling focusing on federal constitutional rights. And it's significant because there's no ruling like this in the country. And the court does a very good job of going through the tough legal issues, not only First Amendment, but also the parental rights issues, the 14th Amendment. And it's very significant. I think that this will ultimately be the end ruling in the case. But here we are, the preliminary injunction phase. The court has determined this policy likely violates the U.S. Constitution, and I think it does put this school district and the state and all school districts, frankly, on notice that these policies are likely unlawful, and they need to be very careful if they try to enforce them.
Paul, it's interesting. I'm a parent, I'm a journalist, I have 2 kids in public school, right? And so I look at this and I think, okay, you have a policy, and there are other things going on in California as well right now. There are school boards that have tried to create policies, as you well know, to protect parents from this sort of thing. And those policies are now, the state is suing at least one district over that policy. And so when you look at this, we're talking about the teachers' rights in this case. And correct me if I'm wrong on any part of this, but we're talking about the teachers' constitutional rights. Then there's the whole parental side of this. I mean, what do you think is the end game on this? Are states and districts going to be able to step into the role of parent, which is essentially what is happening here, pushing the teachers' rights to the side, becoming the parent, and telling the parents that they're a danger to their kids? I mean, is there any world in which this would be allowed to stand, do you think, nationally?
I don't think so. So the court in our ruling, and it's very much worth reviewing the ruling, the court says that this policy constitutes a trifecta of harms, and that touches on the point you just made. It harms students, it harms parents, and it harms teachers. Obviously, our case, we're representing teachers, but the harms are all on all 3. But I don't think, look, I think how these policies came about is, it seems pretty clear. Very, certain public or private interest organizations, Gay Straight Alliance, various groups have drafted these policies, sent them all over the country, and for whatever reason, school districts are just adopting them, and state boards of education are suggesting that this kind of guidance is required. And in California, what's very interesting is, on the one hand, they try to say that this guidance is required, or is, they try to say it's guidance for the school districts. They said it's not binding, it's just guidance. You talk to the school district, they'll say, we only have this policy because California said we had to. And in our case, they weren't even defending the merits of the policy. They were making arguments about standing and jurisdiction and immunity. And it wasn't until we brought to the court's attention, look, Your Honor, they're actually suing the Chino Union School District for having a policy that dares to contradict this supposed non-binding guidance the state has issued to every school district. The judge was very troubled. He said that's deeply troubling. He didn't know that. And the state kind of tried to play it both ways. On the one hand, trying to tell the court here, this is just guidance, Your Honor. We don't have anything to do with this. We shouldn't be here. On the other hand, they're in court getting an injunction. By the way, that injunction was based on California privacy rights that they got. It was a TRO, not a preliminary injunction, temporary restraining order. And if there's a conflict between the California Constitution and the U.S. Constitution, the U.S. Constitution trumps. I mean, and in our case, we're dealing with federal constitutional rights. So I think, big picture, these are wacky policies. They're dangerous policies. They're unconstitutional policies. But the good news is that this ruling really sets the framework for courts across the country to adopt, which analyzes this in a comprehensive manner. These are not likely to be legal. These policies are likely to be unconstitutional, and this order explains why.
Well, and I appreciate you breaking that down. And Lori, I want to come back to you in a moment, but I want to bring up one more thing about Chino Valley, which is the district where the state, as you mentioned, is suing. That particular policy, the idea that parents should be notified within 3 days if their child is transitioning or, going by a different name at school or a different pronoun. A parent, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, but a parent or a student could walk into their school and demand their records at any point. Those records are the right of the family to have. So the idea that a parent wouldn't be able to be given information about their child in any capacity, let alone in such a big issue as this, it seems like that doesn't line up with what the law allows, trying to stop that. Am I off base there?
Let me say a few things about that, then I'll turn it over to Lori. The crazy thing about this policy is that it contradicts all kinds of other policies and even the California Education Code. There's all kinds of provisions about transparency and truthfulness to parents and allowing them to question anything in the record. But on the other hand, this policy very clearly and directly says you are to withhold this information. It directly contradicts a whole host, and we explained this to the court, of different board policies, California Education Code provisions, and obviously it violates the U.S. Constitution. I mean, but yes, to answer your question, there's a whole host of other policies and laws that contradict this policy.
Okay, well, thank you. And I'm glad we got to spend some time on that, because I think it is incredibly important for parents to understand that, what their rights are in the midst of this. And Lori, looking at what has gone on, obviously this has not been easy. You step up, you go to court, you sue the district where you've worked for a long time, and you're trying to stop this policy. How has this affected your life, practically speaking? Everything from your job down to the day-to-day and how people are responding to you even.
It's affected both Elizabeth and I negatively. I know I have been very anxious, very worried about this whole process. And once we filed the case, we were right to be worried. Many of our coworkers were clearly against us. They made a concerted effort to buy matching t-shirts and all wear them on the same day when we had the 8th grade meeting. I'm an 8th grade teacher. That's the only day I see them. I'm in PE and we have our own lunch area. I kind of just stay in PE. So I don't see other teachers except for on the meeting days. And they were showing their protest loud and clear. We also heard that teachers were telling students incorrect information about the lawsuit and about us. And I think the district made a big misstep in not communicating to all the staff, don't discuss this with children. They really didn't need to hear it. So it's been a difficult process. I have had trouble sleeping. I've had anxiety in the past, and this has really notched it up. And when do I get to go back to work?
I will say though, Billy, just to jump in, Lori and Elizabeth also got a lot of positive feedback too,
sure.
From teachers and parents.
Yes.
Yeah. I think in life, when these things happen, when the negative hits, it hits a lot harder, right? And so you feel it. But I have seen a lot of positive come. People are encouraging you and saying, we support you doing this. What in terms of work? When was the last time you were able to teach?
It was in the middle of May, and then I missed the last 2 weeks of school, and that really broke my heart. I'm an 8th grade teacher. Graduation day is the culmination of our whole year together. I get to see the kids move on to the next step of their life, and most of them I will never see again. So it's like a bittersweet day. It's proud of my students, and then sad that I will never get to see them again. But I do have many students that come back from high school and will come back and visit. And when they come back, it's just heartwarming. I know that I really touched those children. And I was very sad. I really wanted to be at the graduation. And when they take you out of a class like that, the kids have no idea, where's Mrs. West? No one will tell them anything. I had a couple of students actually reached out to me on Instagram, and I was under an order not to talk to any kids. And I'm hoping in the future, again, I can reach out to these kids when this is over and kind of explain what happened. They just it's like I disappeared. And I felt like that was bad for the kids. They wondered what happened to Mrs. West.
Absolutely. Paul, how does this work legally if they wanted to go back and teach? Is it more of a personal decision to not go back and teach right now until the case is over? How does that play out?
Right. So the court order was issued specifically to let them get back to work in order to have their job without violating their faith. Now it's just a matter of timing, making sure that when they get back, circumstances are safe and they're taking measures to make sure that the prior issues that we're talking about have been addressed. In the case of Lori, there was also some investigation surrounding, certain events that happened. So once all those are all concluded, we'll talk to the district about getting them back. But they want to go back. They are legally allowed to go back at this point in light of the court's ruling. So I don't think the plan is to keep them on leave until the case is over. The plan is to get them back as soon as we can, but just in a prudent way.
And Paul, what is the next step in the case right now that the injunction is there? What happens next?
Well, what should happen is that the state should remove the guidance, and the school district should, rescind the policies and agree never to do this ever again to anybody. But likely that won't happen right away. So what will happen in the case is we'll need to continue with the case, go through the discovery phase, take depositions, get some written discovery, and then move for summary judgment and get a permanent injunction against the state and the school district. But that process will take several months. But again, I do think that both the state and the school district should just see the writing on the wall at this point and move on. Yeah,
well, based on the Chino Valley case, I'm thinking that might not happen, but we'll have to wait and see. Now, Lori, last question for you. What is keeping you going in this? Because it would be easy, feeling the anxiety, the pressure of other people, to throw in the towel and say, you know what, I'm not gonna do this anymore. I'm gonna move on from it. But what keeps you going in the case?
My friends and family have been very supportive, and getting some emails and things from parents that are on our side at school. Before we were put out of work, a parent had sent us flowers to the front office, and that was just so heartwarming. And she wasn't even a parent from a kid at our school. She was just someone that had seen the story on the news and wanted us to know that she supported. And then the following week, she sent them boxes of chocolates for both of us. Seeing parental support. I think before this happened, parents did not really know about this policy. It was never really shared by our school district. And so at least we're bringing this to light so parents have the ability to know what's happening and use your voice, parents. Please use your voice. Step up. Go to school board meetings. We need to replace school board members. We need to change the whole culture of public schools.
Yeah, and I think people are waking up. I think you're seeing this happen after COVID around the country, where parents are more involved. And your case, again, I think is going to be one that really does wake a lot of other people up who maybe haven't been paying attention. I appreciate you both taking the time, breaking the story down, and taking us through it today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Billy.